Welcome back to The Explainer. Look, today we are jumping straight into a massive, high-stakes biological crisis that is actively unfolding inside the bodies of millions of people. If you are over 45 and you're dealing with knee, hip, or shoulder pain, you've probably been told the same old story. Your cartilage is just wearing out. And hey, that loss is permanent. But what if the medical community has been looking at this entirely the wrong way? What if we are literally on the precipice of a radical shift in orthopedics? In this explainer, we're going deep into the gritty biological realities of joint degeneration. We're going to expose what is really happening inside those aching joints of yours and uncover a late 2025 medical breakthrough that is actively rewriting the future of osteoarthritis.
So let's start by being brutally honest and asking this critical question. When you go to a clinic for joint pain, you're almost always handed a quick fix just to numb the discomfort, right? But are you actually treating the disease, or are you merely masking a biological collapse? For decades, the standard approach to osteoarthritis has been incredibly reactive. We just wait for the pain to get unbearable, we numb it, and then we essentially cross our fingers until surgery is the only option left on the table. We absolutely need to challenge this approach right now, because treating the symptom while ignoring the collapsing environment inside your joint, that is exactly how a minor, annoying ache transforms into an irreversible orthopedic catastrophe.
All right, let's get into phase one, the silent joint collapse. To really understand how to fight back against this, we have to completely dismiss that simplistic wear and tear myth. Cartilage loss is not passive. It is an active, aggressive biological event. Think of the mechanical failure in your joint like the pothole effect. Imagine a tiny dark spot on your cartilage, a minor lesion, basically a small hole. If you don't address it with the right mechanical strategies, well, it acts exactly like a pothole on a busy highway. Every single time a car drives over it, the pothole splinters and widens. Inside your body, with every step you take under a heavy load, with poor body mechanics, and a constant state of inflammation, that small defect relentlessly expands. But the physical widening of that hole, that's really just the beginning of the nightmare.
Because this is the biological tipping point. This is where a purely mechanical issue turns into a highly toxic environment. As that pothole widens, these microscopic, sharp fragments of damaged cartilage break loose and start floating around inside the joint. And they act like tiny shards of glass, irritating an incredibly sensitive, delicate lining around your joint called the synovium. Now, when this synovium gets irritated, it doesn't just hurt. Actually, scratch that. It panics. It acts like a massive biological alarm bell, triggering a severe, localized inflammatory response that completely alters the chemistry of your joint.
And this sets off what we call an inflammatory cascade, and it happens with terrifying speed. Step 1, that cartilage fragment breaks loose. Step 2, the synovium becomes deeply, deeply irritated. Step 3 is where your own biology basically turns against you. The synovium starts pumping out these aggressive signaling molecules, things like interleukins and prostaglandins. These are highly inflammatory chemicals that just flood the joint capsule. And finally, step 4, because of this toxic chemical soup, the joint starts swelling up, intense stiffness sets in, the pain ramps up drastically, and widespread joint damage accelerates. This is exactly how a tiny little mechanical injury snowballs straight toward that joint replacement surgery everyone is terrified of. Look at this quote. Once that inflammatory engine gets going, that tiny cartilage injury can snowball into widespread joint damage. I really want you to internalize the sheer gravity of that statement. It explains so much. It's exactly why two different people can have the exact same level of arthritis on an X-ray, but one is out there living a totally normal life and the other feels like their knee is literally disintegrating. This destructive engine is actively fueled by your age, your body weight, your genetics, your activity level, and your overall metabolic health. If you're eating a highly inflammatory diet and carrying extra weight, you are essentially pouring gasoline directly onto this biological fire.
Which brings us to phase 2, masking the underlying damage. We need to shift our investigation to how mainstream medicine typically responds to this crisis. Because, quite frankly, many common treatments completely fail to address the root biological issue. Let's start with one of the oldest tools in the shed, corticosteroids. Yes, a steroid shot can calm inflammation down incredibly fast. And yes, patients often feel this dramatic, immediate relief. It feels like magic. But we have to look at the long-term clinical reality here. What a lot of patients are not clearly warned about is that repeated intra-articular steroid use is actually associated with progressive cartilage loss over time. Plus, it can spike your blood pressure, mess with your blood sugar, and strain your kidneys. Treating these injections casually or just using them as a permanent Band-Aid can literally accelerate the demise of the exact joint you are trying so desperately to save.
Then, of course, we have the trap of hyaluronic acid. Now, injecting this substance can genuinely improve the joint environment. It helps with lubrication. It buys you some time. But if you get an injection, feel great, and then just come back 6 months later for another one, without ever addressing your joint strength, your daily movement habits, or your body weight, you are trapped in hyaluronic acid dependency. You're just relying on a needle instead of actually fixing the failing mechanical system that caused the pothole in the very first place.
And that brings us to platelet-rich plasma, or PRP. We need to strip away the heavy marketing hype around this right now. A lot of clinics will try to sell this to you as a guaranteed cartilage regenerator and an absolute miracle cure. That is simply false. While international consensus statements do recognize PRP as a really promising option for reducing inflammation in mild to moderate osteoarthritis, it is absolutely not a magic bullet. It does not mean your end-stage bone-on-bone arthritis has been instantly reversed. It is a fantastic, powerful support tool for the right patient, but it is not a cure.
Now, let's move to phase 3, the cellular regeneration breakthrough. Up until this point, we've had virtually nothing in our arsenal that pushes damaged cartilage toward true regeneration. But a recent publication out of Stanford Medicine is actively shaking the entire foundation of orthopedics. For decades, the absolute, unquestioned dogma was that cartilage regeneration was medically impossible. The consensus was, once it's gone, it is gone forever. But look at late 2025. Stanford researchers were studying aged and injured joints in mice, and they managed to identify a very specific degenerative molecule that is actively driving the aging process in cartilage. This discovery is huge. It opens the door to an entirely new future, a new era of targeted biological cartilage repair that changes all the rules. The main villain in this story is an enzyme called 15-PGDH. The Stanford researchers found out that this specific enzyme is heavily involved in the aging and degeneration of your cartilage. But here's the true breakthrough. It's what happened when they interfered with it. By blocking this 15-PGDH pathway in these aged and injured laboratory mice, researchers witnessed striking signs of cartilage regeneration. The cartilage actually began to repair itself, and the animal subjects showed significantly reduced signs of osteoarthritis-related pain. Just one targeted pathway intervention. I really want to emphasize the sheer gravity of that number. The fact that interfering with just a single biological pathway could yield visible cartilage repair and pain reduction, that is absolutely staggering. It means that the long-standing, depressing frustration of arthritis care, the whole idea that we can only delay the inevitable, might be completely wrong. We are looking at the immense potential that one day, a single targeted biological intervention could completely alter the landscape of osteoarthritis treatment forever. Which brings us to this massive ray of hope. The biology of cartilage regeneration may be more modifiable than many people were led to believe. If a doctor looks you in the eye and tells you flat out that regeneration is impossible, they are speaking way too confidently about a field that is evolving at lightning speed. However, we do have to ground ourselves in clinical reality for a second here. This is currently a laboratory breakthrough in mice. It doesn't mean you can walk into a clinic and get a magical regeneration shot instead of your knee replacement next month. But what it proves is that the toxic environment inside your joint can be modified, and it can be rescued.
So what do we do right now? Phase 4, the survival protocol.
Since this regenerative breakthrough isn't available at your local pharmacy just yet, you absolutely cannot just sit around and wait while your joint continues to collapse today. You need to consider these essential non-negotiable protocols as a mandatory prescription. You are the chief medical officer of your own body here. Number 1, strict weight management to heavily reduce the mechanical load on that pothole. 2, anti-inflammatory dietary improvements. You have to starve that biological fire happening in your synovium. 3, structured joint strengthening to support the bone and the surrounding tissue. And 4, consistent, smart physical activity. Any injections or medical interventions you get should only ever be used as a temporary support tool to help you execute this much larger, non-negotiable real-world plan. And whatever you do, you must avoid this at all costs. The sedentary trap. There is a wildly dangerous misconception out there that resting a bad joint, just staying off it entirely and babying it, is the best cure. It's actually the exact opposite. Stopping movement entirely is quite literally the single most destructive action you can take for a deteriorating joint. Lack of movement starves the cartilage of vital nutrients and drastically accelerates the disease. You have to keep moving, smartly and safely, to protect the joint tissue you still have. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly critical choice. Will you step up and take control of your joint's biological environment today? Or are you going to just sit back and wait for tomorrow's miracle while the collapse continues inside you? The science is abundantly clear. Osteoarthritis is not a passive waiting game. It is an active biological fire. You now know exactly how the destruction happens, you know the harsh truth about current mainstream treatments, and you know that true regeneration is finally on the horizon. So stop looking for a shortcut, implement this survival protocol immediately, and fight back. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer. Take control of your health, and I'll see you next time.